They say sunshine heals everything. But out here in California, I've learned that's not always true. Sometimes the sun just makes your pain easier to hide. I'm a nurse. For years I've cared for others, patched up wounds, held trembling hands, whispered hope into tired hearts. But behind my calm smile was a storm no one saw coming. When my husband passed away, everything changed. The laughter in the house faded. The warmth, it disappeared with him. All that was left was me and our 2 kids, Michael and Teresa. From that moment, I became everything. Mom, dad, protector, provider. Every step I took, every breath I breathed was for them. You know, people at work always said, "You're always smiling." Yeah, because if I didn't smile, I might have fallen apart right there in the hallway. Money was always short. Bills piled up faster than I could pay them. Some nights, dinner was just bread and tea. But I told the kids, "We're keeping it simple tonight, California style." They smiled. They believed me. And when they finally closed their eyes, I'd sit in the dark, counting coins, whispering prayers, fighting tears I refused to let fall. When Michael and Teresa started their new school, big city, loud halls, strangers everywhere, they tried to fit in. But I saw it. The way they missed our small town. The way their smiles felt different. Like the city had stolen a little bit of their innocence. I'd sit by the window late at night, staring at the city lights. They looked so beautiful, so full of promise. But to me, they were just reminders that I was still fighting. I used to look up and wonder if my husband was watching over us. If he could see me trying my best to keep us from falling apart. "Just a little longer," I'd whisper. "They still need you." The nights were long, the mornings harder. But no matter how tired I was, when that alarm went off at 5 a.m., I got up, tied my hair, put on my scrubs, and walked into another day, pretending I was stronger than I felt. Because that's what love does. It keeps you moving, even when your heart feels too heavy to carry. Love kept me going. Hope kept me alive. But what I didn't know was that life wasn't done testing me yet. Not even close. Because sometimes the heaviest storms come right after the calm. They say moving to the city is like hitting restart. Yeah, sure. But nobody tells you that sometimes it's just the same pain, with brighter lights. Life in the city hit different. Everything moved faster, sounded louder, felt heavier. My kids tried to keep up, but I could see it, the confusion in their eyes. The small-town warmth we once knew was gone, replaced by a world that demanded too much and gave way too little. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, doubles, triples, whatever they'd give me. Rent, bills, school fees, it all stacked up. Some nights I came home so tired I couldn't even eat. I'd just drop my bag, sit on the couch, and let the silence wrap around me, like a blanket I didn't ask for. But when I'd peek into their room and see Michael and Teresa asleep, all peaceful and innocent, the exhaustion just melted away. Their peace was my reward. Their dreams were my fuel. Still, there were nights when the quiet felt too loud. When the loneliness crept in like a cold draft you can't escape. I'd sit by the window, looking out at the city lights flickering through the smog, and wonder, are you watching over us? Are you proud of the woman I've become? Because honestly, some nights I didn't even recognize her myself. Years passed like that. Work, exhaustion, survival. One long blur of responsibility. The kids grew taller, older, stronger. And me? I learned how to live on autopilot. How to smile through fatigue, laugh through worry, and keep moving even when my legs felt like they might give out. There were moments that felt almost normal. A birthday here, a laugh there. Michael started making friends. Teresa brought home good grades. And for a while, I let myself believe maybe we were okay. Maybe, finally, the storm had passed. But deep down, I knew. Life doesn't hand out peace without asking for something back. And the thing about calm skies, they never last forever. One night, after another long shift, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Half-eaten sandwich, half-paid bills, half a heart still trying to keep beating. And I felt it. That strange, heavy quiet right before something changes. Like the air itself was warning me. I didn't know what was coming, but something inside me whispered, "Get ready." Because storms don't always start with thunder. Sometimes they begin with silence. And soon, I'd learn just how hard it is to stand tall when the next one hits. Time has this strange way of moving. Fast enough to change everything, but slow enough to make you feel every crack in your heart as it happens. The years rolled on, and my children grew. Michael, my eldest, got a job, a good one. He'd worked hard for it, and I couldn't have been prouder. And soon after, he brought home someone special. Her name was Sarah. She was beautiful, graceful, polite, always speaking with that soft, careful tone that made people instantly trust her. The first time I met her, she held out her hand and said, "It's so nice to finally meet you." And I believed her. I believed every word. I welcomed her with open arms. I cooked her favorite meals, gave her space to feel at home, and treated her not like a guest, but like my own daughter. Because that's how I was raised. Love first, question later. And I truly believed my son had found someone who would bring warmth, respect, and kindness into our little family. But time, it has a way of peeling back the layers, and what's underneath isn't always what you expect. At first, it was subtle. A tone here, a look there. The warmth in Sarah's smile began to fade, like a sunset that didn't want to return. Her words, once sweet, started to carry an edge. She still smiled, but her eyes told a different story. I tried to brush it off, told myself maybe I was imagining things. Maybe she was just tired, adjusting, figuring out her place in a new home. So I kept giving, kept forgiving. But slowly, Michael began to change too. He stopped calling me the way he used to. He stopped laughing with me, the kind of laughter that used to fill the house like music. His visits became shorter, his hugs became stiffer, and his words, they grew sharper, like someone else was speaking through him. I started wondering, what did I see wrong? Did I say something? Was I too much? Too little? Every mother knows the feeling when your child starts to slip away, not because of distance, but because of silence. And that silence, it's the loudest kind of pain there is. I told myself it was just life. People change, love changes, families adjust. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Then came the whispers, late at night, behind closed doors. Words carried through the thin walls of my own home. Words I wasn't meant to hear. I'd walk into a room and suddenly, conversations would stop. Papers would be folded quickly, tucked away in drawers. Their eyes would dart to each other, then to me, pretending everything was fine. But you can't fool a mother's instinct. One evening, I was walking past the hallway, and I heard her voice. Sarah. Cold, sharp, calculated. She said, "Once this house is in our name, everything will finally be ours." My heart, it just stopped. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I stood there, frozen, because I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. This house? The home I had built with my husband, brick by brick. The home where we raised our children, where his laughter still echoed in the walls, where every corner held a memory of love, sacrifice, and loss. They wanted to take it from me. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the city outside. Her words just kept replaying in my head, over and over again, like a cruel melody that wouldn't stop. Once this house is in our name. Each time I heard it in my mind, it cut deeper. And what hurt the most wasn't her voice. It was his silence. Michael didn't say a word. He didn't defend me, didn't stop her. He just let it happen. That kind of silence, it's not empty. It's heavy. It's filled with every unspoken betrayal you never thought you'd have to live through. I remember sitting at the kitchen table the next morning, my hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. Michael came in, kissed me on the forehead and said, "Don't worry, Mom. Everything's going to be okay." But his eyes, they couldn't meet mine. That's when I knew. Something had shifted forever. The little boy who once held my hand crossing the street now stood on the other side, holding someone else's, while I stood alone, watching everything I built start to crumble. You know, people always talk about heartbreak like it only happens in love stories, but they forget. Sometimes your heart breaks inside your own family, and there's no word for that kind of pain. Love can blind you until betrayal forces your eyes open. That night, I sat by the window again, the same one I used to sit by when the kids were little. I looked out at the city lights, the same lights that once gave me hope. But now, they just looked distant, unreachable. And in that quiet moment, I realized something. The hands that once reached for me in love had become the same hands that pushed me away. The hands that betrayed. Thanksgiving night. A day meant for gratitude, for family, for love. But that night, for me, it became the moment my heart learned what betrayal really sounds like. I woke up before sunrise, just like old times. The house was cold, but I didn't mind. I had a plan. To make the kind of meal that might remind everyone of the warmth we used to have. The smell of roasted chicken drifted through the kitchen, garlic bread crisped perfectly in the oven, and cinnamon from the pie danced in the air. It smelled like peace, like a memory I was trying so hard to bring back. Cooking was my language of love, my way of saying, we're still a family, even when everything around me had started to feel like pretend. By evening, the guests arrived. Laughter filled the house, glasses clinked. The music was low but cheerful. It should have felt warm, but somehow it felt like standing outside in the rain, watching everyone else stay dry. I sat in my little corner of the room, smiling when people looked my way, nodding politely when they said, "Happy Thanksgiving." But behind every smile, I could feel it, that invisible wall between me and them, the distance that no one talked about, that everyone felt. Then, Michael stood up. My son, my boy, the same child who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who once promised he'd buy me a big house when he grew up. He looked at me, and for a second I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd say something kind. Instead, he picked up a small plastic bag. It was see-through. Inside, I could see cold chicken bones, a few soggy pieces of bread, a scoop of mashed potatoes already turning gray. He walked toward me slowly, with that smirk, the one he'd learned from her. Sarah. She stood behind him, arms crossed, her smile thin and satisfied. He stopped in front of me. The whole room went quiet. And then he said, "This is your food now, freeloader." The word sliced through me. I didn't move, couldn't breathe. My chest burned, my hands shook, but my body, it just froze. All around me people stared. Some pretended not to notice. Some looked away. And Sarah, she didn't even blink. My son, the boy I raised alone, the child I'd given my whole world to, stood there, handing me scraps like I was nothing. I wanted to scream, to ask him what happened to the love we used to share, but no sound came out. The world felt heavy, like all the air in that room had turned to stone. And then I smiled, a small, trembling, broken smile. Not because I was okay, but because sometimes silence is the only dignity you have left. I took the bag. My fingers brushed his, but his touch was cold, like a stranger's. I nodded, forced my lips to move, and whispered, "Thank you." He turned away, just like that. And the moment he did, the noise came back. Laughter, chatter, forks scraping plates, as if nothing had happened, as if I had never existed. But for me, time stopped right there. I sat there, the plastic bag resting in my lap. The food was still warm, maybe from my hands, maybe from the shame burning through me. And all I could think was, how did we get here? How did love turn into this? How did the boy who once couldn't sleep without hearing my voice become the man who could humiliate me without flinching? That night, I didn't cry. No tears came. I just went into the kitchen after everyone had left, turned off the lights, and sat in the dark. The moonlight slipped in through the window, painting the floor in silver. The bag of leftovers sat beside me, untouched. It wasn't food anymore. It was a reminder of how love can rot when pride takes its place. I stared at the moon and thought of his father, how he used to say, Our home will always be their safe place. I wanted to believe that still, but now it didn't even feel like mine. I remembered every night I'd stayed awake to make sure Michael had enough to eat. Every morning I'd walked to work before dawn so the bills were paid. Every sacrifice I'd made so my children could dream without worry. And all of it, all those years, ended with a plastic bag and a word that stung deeper than any knife. Funny thing about betrayal, it doesn't come from your enemies. It comes from the people you'd never guard yourself against. The cruelest part of it all wasn't what he said. It was realizing that, in his eyes, I had already stopped mattering long before that night. So I sat there, still, holding that bag like a wound I couldn't close. The house grew quiet. Even the clock seemed afraid to tick too loud. And in that silence, I finally understood something I'd been avoiding for years. You can give your whole life to people. Your love, your time, your dreams, and still, one day, they'll forget you ever had a heartbeat that cared for them. That night, I didn't lose my son. I just realized he was already gone, and as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I whispered to myself, sometimes, the people you'd die for are the ones who kill you the slowest. And the saddest part? They'll never even notice the day you finally stop breathing for them. The next morning, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't bring peace. Only echoes. The clinking of dishes, the hum of the fridge. Even the air itself felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, looking around, seeing the same walls that once heard laughter, now holding nothing but ghosts. I didn't cry, not that morning. Something inside me had already gone still. Not broken, just done. I packed a small bag, folded a few clothes, nothing fancy, just enough for wherever I was headed next. And then I found it, my old nurse's badge. The metal was cold against my fingers, but it still felt like home. That little badge had seen everything. The woman I was before the heartbreak, before the loneliness, before the betrayal. It reminded me that I once healed people, that I once mattered. I placed it gently in the bag, not as luggage, but as proof that I had lived. Before leaving, I stood in the doorway for a long time. The morning light spilled across the floorboards, touching every corner I had once called mine. Every dent in the wall had a story. Every photo frame held faces that used to smile for real. The laughter of my children, the smell of Sunday breakfast, the sound of little feet running through the hall. It was all still there. Not in sound, but in memory. And yet, the house felt empty. A house full of people, but not a home left inside it. I turned the key in the lock one last time. No goodbyes, no letters on the counter, no tears, just silence. Because sometimes silence says everything words can't. Days later, the phone rang. The caller ID showed Michael's name. For a moment, I almost didn't answer. But then I did, just to see if there was anything left of the boy I raised. His voice came through the line, cold, impatient. "Where are you?" I stayed quiet. I could hear the frustration building in his tone, like he was talking to a stranger who'd wronged him. "You didn't even tell us where you went," he snapped. With faint sadness, I wanted to laugh. Not out of joy, but because he didn't realize. I had already left long before my body did. My heart had packed its bags months ago. So I said softly, "You'll find out soon." And I hung up. What he didn't know, what no one knew, was that everything they had been planning, every whispered scheme, every paper they thought would make the house theirs, was already out of their reach. Because months before that cruel Thanksgiving, I had walked into a small law office on the corner of Maple and Fifth. No one knew, no one asked. I just sat there, an old nurse in a quiet waiting room, holding a folder that carried everything I'd built in my life. When the lawyer asked, "Are you sure about this?" I didn't hesitate. I smiled and said, "I've never been more sure." I transferred every ounce of ownership, the house, the savings, the insurance, not to Michael, not to Teresa, not to anyone who shared my blood, but to a charity foundation for abandoned elders. For people like me, the forgotten, the quiet, the ones left behind after giving too much. As I signed the papers, my heart ached. Every stroke of the pen felt like cutting an umbilical cord that had kept me tied to pain. But my hands didn't shake. Because deep down I knew, love doesn't mean letting someone destroy you. I walked out of that office feeling lighter than I had in years. The city outside looked brighter, the air softer, the sky a little less cruel. For once, I didn't feel like the victim of my story. I felt like the author. Days later, when they found out what I had done, there was shouting, there was anger, there was disbelief. I wasn't there to hear it, but I could imagine it clearly. Michael pacing the room, his voice rising. Sarah trying to make sense of it, flipping through papers like maybe she'd find a loophole. But there wasn't one. Their voices couldn't reach me anymore, because I was already gone, not running away, but walking toward peace. I rented a small room near the ocean, the kind of place where the air smells like salt and freedom. Every morning I'd sit by the window, watching the waves roll in and out like clockwork. Sometimes I'd close my eyes and imagine my younger self sitting beside me, the tired nurse with worn hands, the mother who carried the world on her back. And I'd whisper to her, "You made it. You finally made it." I didn't need to see their faces again, didn't need an apology, because I had already won. Not through revenge in the way people expected, but through peace. My silence had become my justice, my leaving, my quiet revenge. See, sometimes the loudest strength doesn't come from shouting, it comes from walking away, without bitterness, without regret, and knowing that peace is something they'll never take from you. People think revenge means hurting someone back, but real revenge is healing. It's smiling again when they thought you'd never recover. It's living free while they're still trapped in their guilt. Now when the wind blows through the open window, it carries no voices from the past, only the sound of waves and the peace I earned the hard way. And every night before I close my eyes, I whisper to the woman in the mirror, "You didn't lose them. You just finally found yourself." Sometimes, the strongest voice is the one that speaks through quiet decisions. Time has a strange way of healing things, not by erasing the pain, but by teaching you how to live with it. Months turned into seasons. The world kept spinning, even though a few hearts were still trying to catch up. Michael still lived in that same house, the one his mother had turned into a home with her laughter and her love. But now it felt different, colder, quieter. He'd wake up to the sound of silence, walk past her old chair by the window, and swear he could still smell her perfume in the air, faint, like a memory that refused to fade. He'd go through her things sometimes, the faded apron she used to wear when cooking, the cracked teacup she never replaced. Each object, a ghost, whispering stories he used to ignore. Some nights, he'd sit in that same chair, holding the letter she left behind. The words were fading now, the ink blurred with tears, but the meaning was carved deep into his soul. I loved you more than my own life, but love should never mean losing yourself. He'd whisper her name sometimes, hoping maybe the wind would carry it to wherever she was. But the only reply was the echo of his own regret. Meanwhile, miles away, she lived in a small coastal town, the kind where mornings smelled like salt and peace. Her days were simple. She'd walk to the market, feed stray cats that gathered by her porch, and spend afternoons reading letters from people she didn't know. Elders she helped through the foundation she'd once donated everything to. Funny how life comes full circle. She used to heal bodies. Now, she healed hearts. Quietly, gently, like only someone who's known pain can. Sometimes the volunteers would call her Miss Ruth, though her real name hardly mattered anymore. She'd smile and nod, pretending she didn't hear when they whispered about the kindness in her eyes. Because deep down, she knew. She wasn't kind because life had been gentle with her. She was kind because it hadn't been. In the evenings, she'd sit by the window with her cup of tea, watching the sun sink into the ocean, the sky painted in colors only peace could understand. The world around her moved slowly now. No shouting, no cold stares, just the quiet hum of life continuing, the sound of seagulls calling somewhere in the distance, and the steady rhythm of her heartbeat, proof she was still here. Sometimes she'd think about Michael, not with anger anymore, but with a kind of soft sadness. A mother's love never really dies. It just learns to live differently. She hoped he'd found his way back to himself, that he'd learned what it meant to cherish something before it was gone. She forgave him long before he knew he needed forgiveness, because holding on to hate would have kept her trapped in the same pain she'd worked so hard to escape. One evening, as the sky turned gold, a young woman from the foundation stopped by. She was new, full of energy and questions. "Miss Ruth," she said, "how do you stay so calm after everything you've been through?" The old woman smiled faintly, her eyes glimmering like dusk light over water. "Because," she said softly, "peace isn't something the world gives you. It's something you choose, every single day." The girl smiled, nodded, and walked away. But those words stayed, because they weren't just advice. They were truth carved from a lifetime of heartbreak and healing. Later that night, she sat on her porch, the ocean breeze brushing through her silver hair. The moon hung low, and the sound of waves hitting the shore carried a kind of rhythm her soul recognized. Steady, forgiving, endless. She closed her eyes and whispered, "To love, to lose, and still to live." A tear slid down her cheek, not from pain this time, but from gratitude, for the lessons, for the strength, for the quiet that once felt empty, but now felt like home. Back in that city she once left behind, Michael stood by the window one last time. He held his mother's letter against his heart, the same way a child holds on to a prayer. He finally understood what she meant, that love isn't about possession. It's about freedom. And sometimes the only way to truly love someone is to let them go. He whispered softly into the night, "I'm sorry, Mom." No one heard it. No one needed to. Because somewhere, miles away, beyond the waves and the noise, a woman smiled without knowing why. as if the universe had finally carried his apology to her heart. And in that silence, both hearts, broken and distant, finally found peace in the same breath. Because sometimes the loudest love story is the one told without a single word.